All good. Okay, let's get started. So I'm Kara Kane. I work at GDS, the Government Digital Service, as the head of design, head of the design profession. I'm hosting today. I'm also joined by Helena, who's the head of user-centered design on our Gov.uk One Login program. So we will be hosting and running the show. So this is all part of Services Week, which has been happening this week. If you're not familiar with Services Week, this is a series of events that have been taking place over the past 4 days, all from the UK public sector. And it's sponsored by the Government Digital and Data Function. And it has been organized by a cross-government group of people and sponsored as well by the the Central Digital and Data Office. So it's a supported, self-organized series of events, which is all about increasing service literacy and talking about what good services and what good service transformation looks like. It's all self-organized. So all of the events are run by people in different organizations, different departments, based on what they wanted to do with Services Week. So there's been such a range of sessions and even training that have been happening and workshops throughout the week. This year, there were over 60 sessions organized by more than 20 organizations. And a change this year is that we've widened it to include government partners like consultancies in the private sector. So this is the first year that we've opened it up. So we've kind of gone from government to that including local government to including wider public sector, and now we've widened it even more. If you want to see what the week looked like, you can go to the CDDO blog, so cddoblog.gov.uk, and you can see the whole agenda of sessions that have been happening this week. We do have a code of conduct that also applies to this session. By participating in the session, we expect that you agree to it. You can find it online using a bit.ly link, so bit.ly/SW22 conduct. And you can join the conversation. You can talk about the stuff that we're going to be talking about. This is public. We don't do this very often. This is quite rare. So if you want to share what you've experienced or learned today, you can use the hashtag Services Week. You can tag us on social media, on X and Instagram. We're also on LinkedIn. And just a really quick overview around, why this week matters and what we really aim to achieve. Just a couple quotes from people that have taken part. Someone's described it as Services Week is always one of the highlights of the year for me. There's so much interesting work happening all across government. It's an excellent opportunity to spend time being inspired by everyone else and learning from how others are digging into gnarly problems. Definitely saw a lot of this happening this week from sessions that I attended. And someone else said that it creates a buzz to talk about the organization, about the benefits of service design. Services Week helps us to explain to the organization that digital is more about technology. So it's really useful for people to run things in their departments and really get great conversation going. And the reason why GDS is running this session, it's because it's part of our ethos. We talk a lot about making things open because it makes things better, which is one of our design principles. We really believe this. Our mission at GDS is to design and protect the user experience of government. And we're about 750 people, all different digital and non-digital roles based in London, Bristol, and Manchester. And you're going to hear a little bit more about GDS and our work in a minute. The final bit of housekeeping is to use the chat function if you want to ask any questions. So pop them in the chat, and we will have a few questions for each speaker. So to get on with the show, we have an introduction from Chris Bellamy. Chris is our director of Gov.uk at the Government Digital Service, and I'm going to hand over to Chris to introduce this.
Hello, everybody. It's really great to be asked to be here today. And I can see from the work it's been a really fantastic week, and we're all set for a great afternoon. My name's Chris Bellamy. I'm the director of Gov.uk, part of GDS. And to close off Service Week, as a tradition, we always have the GDS show and tell. But before we get into our exciting presentations, and I think this year is a particularly exciting year, I want to reflect on this year's Service Week and the state of play for digital government design and the millions of users that rely on public services across the globe. So it's been, let's just start with some numbers. So there's been 120 speakers, there's been 60 sessions, the most we've ever had. Over 20 organisations have joined us, and we've had 1,700 attendees. These are really big numbers. It shows how much people think that this matters, and you should be rightly proud of yourself. I'd just like to pull out a few highlights from the agenda to show the diversity of topics and organisations. There was Birmingham City Council with a talk on their website and service design challenges and what they're doing in local government programmes. From DWP, they talked about how to minimise the carbon footprint on a digital service, a key piece that we should all really, really think about going forward. And we had this wonderful session on trauma-informed design by the Department for Education and the Ministry of Justice, something I don't think we've talked about before in real detail, but an important part of what we go on to do in the coming months and years. I'd just like to take a moment to think about the importance of user-centric design within a changing world. We at GDS have been doing this for about 12 years now, and the world has clearly changed around us. And it's important that we don't rest on our laurels. So when we started Service Week a few years back, I think it started in 2019, we absolutely tackled the challenges of the day and everything that we saw in the near future. But so much has changed. And I just want to try and think about that in the context of GDS. So I'll just talk a little bit, if I can, about sort of the context we find ourselves in. So when we started our journey, it really was just about websites. And now we sit here where most of our traffic is on mobile phones. That's moved dramatically and continues to change from month to month. We've also now at the situation where we know that we've got to tackle the needs of our new users, so young people coming through who don't particularly see websites as the way that they want to get to information. Social media has gone on to just completely cement itself, and we now have big players such as TikTok. And we know that for young users, that's sort of 42% of them are using TikTok every day. And 85% of them are using it, and 42% of them are using it on a regular basis. We also know that the way that people consume content has changed. We need to really think about that going forward. Is there an opportunity to see that that's an area that we need to lean into in the future? And we had this big, enormous, significant wholesale phenomenon that happened to us. The impact of the pandemic on what people do has just fundamentally changed what people think about as they think what a digital service can do for them going forward, both now and in the current years, in future years. So when we look at that backdrop and we think about the changes around us and how consumers and users are starting to think about how they get to products and services, we can't ignore it. We probably thought about 12 years ago that people would always have to come to our services. So almost, why would it matter? And then the great work that was done by both GDS and lots of people on this call and teams that you work with has meant that we've been able to really change that narrative. Everything that we've gone on to do with user-centric design has made an enormous impact on people's lives. So really, what next? How do we make it possible to ensure that services continue to serve the needs of users? How do we look at the current situation where everything around us has fundamentally changed and ensure that we continue to grow our services? It's a real conundrum, and we need to really think about it as we step out on our next few years. We've done so much, but there's so much more to do. So I'd just like to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've done so far in GDS. Let's start with the One Login programme. You find us 2 years into the work being done by the One Login team. It is superb to see the commitment that's gone into this work. We now have 3.8 million people who have proven their identity on One Login. We're now in a situation where they're starting to think about how they access services. One of the things that the One Login team has done is made it possible for people to use this service through apps. 4.7 million people. We have a rating on apps of 4.7, which is wonderful. And we can tell that this is a service that users really want to use, and we'll be leaning into that going forward. We've also started to think about how we can solve the needs of users that come to gov.uk, for example, and find it really difficult to use services. The team that look after the gov.uk forms have made it possible for users to have a much better, more accessible service and make it easier for them to deal with day-to-day services that they want to navigate. We've started to think about how we can expand the work on our existing products, such as gov.uk Pay. 370 public sector organisations use this service, and we continue to develop it going forward to make sure it serves the needs of users in the future. The gov.uk Notify system sends 8 billion notifications, and it deals with 8,000 public sector organisations. Again, this is a service that we ensure we serve the needs of not just today's users, but what they might need in the future. And then when I come to my own world of gov.uk, we've really needed to think about the service that we provide and what our users would need from it in the future. So I'd just like to speak for just a couple of minutes about how we can really ensure that gov.uk is doing what it needs to do for users as we go forward. So let's just start thinking about our product proposition. When we started 12 years ago, we were a website, and over the years, we've worked hard to ensure that we've iterated on that product to make it fit for purpose for users. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. We really have made sure that we are working hard to make sure it works for users across the UK and beyond. This year, we've reset our strategy to ensure that we can develop that even further. And we've started to think about how we can make it possible for users to access services at their point of need, or even at the point where they haven't realised the need was there. They're worrying, they know that something needs to change, and they're finding it difficult to navigate services. So we've started to really stretch our mandate and think about how we can make it possible to make it even better for users to access services. We've looked at our channel strategy, and during the course of this year and into next, we have started to really think about what we do on our social platforms, really thinking about the funnel where users access services, getting to them before they get to gov.uk, taking out the noise and distraction of other entrants in the market that might be trying to give them false information. We've thought about how we think about where they access services, talked about the mobile phone, for example, and we're currently working hard to iterate our app proposition, building on the work that One Login has done. That's going incredibly well, but what we need to ensure is that we're not just moving a website to an app. Why would we do that? It wouldn't be right for users. So we really need to make sure that we're doing it with the user in mind. What do they need from that route? What would make it possible for them to have even better accesses to services? So you'll see lots from us this year in that world. We're thinking it much more around how they access services, how they pay for things, how they're notified about things, how they make it possible to get to services quicker, easier, how they can retain their One Login information and make it even possible to make it easier to access services. We've got people on the call here today who are experimenting with AI. It's been wonderful to get into that technology really early, and the work that they're doing is just superb. I'm sure we'll be showing that to you this afternoon. More to do in that space. We know it's risky, but it seems exciting and something that we can definitely experiment with to try and make it even more possible for users to get to services. And we're starting to think about how we think about different formats of content. Absolutely building on the great foundations and the work that's already been done for the past 12 years in GDS. We are proud of that work, and we want to make sure that we enhance that and do more with it going forward. So it's a challenging time for our users, it's a challenging time for government, and it's a challenging time for GDS. We really want to get it right, but we're going to take that challenge and we're going to make sure we think about how we can be sort of the future trendsetters going forward. So we're taking all the great work from the past 12 years. We're working with partners across government and with many of you on this call today, and we're thinking about how we can solve the needs of our users now and in the future. So it's an exciting time. I think it's a time that we should all be proud that we work in government. There's so much to do, and there's so much changing around us. But with the people on this call and people that go on to watch these videos, I'm sure we are in very, very safe hands. And I know that I, as a civil servant, as director of gov.uk, I'm incredibly proud to be part of the mission to make it possible for users to access services and get what they need from government at their point of need. And that's all I've got to say today. I just want to make sure you have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. I'll be dipping in and out of the sessions this afternoon. And if any of you, if you've not had time to meet up in the past and you'd like to reach out and have a chat, it would be wonderful to meet you. And here's to a fantastic year.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Really great scene setting and context setting. And yeah, a bit of an overview of what we're gonna hear from the teams in this show and tell. So I'm going to give everyone an overview of what the rest of the day, rest of the session looks like. So we're going to hear 7 talks. The forums team have 2 talks for us. So we're going to hear from digital service platforms represented by our forums team. We have a couple of gov.uk talks, and then a couple of talks from our gov.uk One Login program. So thanks again, Chris, for kind of setting the scene and doing the introduction. So the first group that I'm going to hand over are the forums team. So I'm handing over to Iain and David and Chris and Oliver.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, hi, we're the gov.uk forums team. So I'm Iain, I'm the engagement lead on the team, and I'm joined by my colleagues who are seamlessly going to say their names about now.
Hi, I'm Oliver, and I'm one of the user researchers on the team.
And I'm Chris. I'm one of the designers on the team.
And I'm David. I'm a front-end developer on the team.
Look at that, what a bunch of pros. So we are really delighted to be here. Services Week is amazing, ACE event all week long. So yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're going to talk about our vision and our mission. We're going to talk about user research, some feedback we've had from users, design in practice, and then we're going to try and show you a cheeky little demo of a new feature, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions as well. Yeah, we've been working really hard for the last kind of couple of years or so. We think we've got a really good platform, and it makes it easy for colleagues to build digital forums. Colleagues who don't have to have any specialist digital skills in order to create forums. And crucially, our research shows that people prefer to fill in forms that are built using gov.uk forms compared, say, with document-based forms like PDFs, Word documents, Excel sheets, and so on. So as you'll hear, we've tested with loads of different user groups, and we've had really positive feedback from each. So in fact, we'd like gov.uk forms to be so good that colleagues across government choose to use it, and this becomes the default tool for building forms across government. And that is because our vision is for all forms on gov.uk to be accessible, easy to use, and quick to process. Here, accessible and easy to use means that the form builder is simple and intuitive to create forms. But it also means that the forms that are made are easy for people to complete, to submit information to government. And then the forms output, so what processing teams receive, that's also quick and easy to process too. So there's quite a lot in that, and that's why it's really hard. So by building an easy to use tool, we can help government to achieve our mission and to deliver on our vision. So we'd like to share some of our findings from research, discuss how these have informed our designs, and then yeah, we'll try and show you a new feature we're quite proud of too. So I'm going to hand over to Oliver to talk about research.
Sure, thanks. I'm going to share some examples here from user research, specifically accessibility testing. Iain talked lots about the fact that we want the forms that people fill in to be accessible. That's incredibly important. But we've also done a lot of work to make sure the tool for building the forms is accessible as well. And part of this is that we've run some usability testing with neurodiverse people as part of our sort of focused accessibility testing of the product. As you know, I'm sure everyone is sort of really aware of it. It's important to test the product with real people who have a range of access needs to reveal the issues and challenges that they might have. And we've been running accessibility testing periodically every sort of couple of months or so throughout our private beta. Each time we've worked with a range of people to make sure we've got lots of different perspectives on this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to achieve that, we've worked with a specialist recruiter to find participants with neurodiversity and cognitive access needs, also lots of other access needs as well, but the findings I'm going to share with you are particularly in this area. Next slide. Thanks. So we've got a couple of quotes from users we've shared the tool with here. First person saying, "My God, it helps when you can actually see it." And the second person, "When it says save and add next question, I'd love a preview there." So this is some feedback that we've had sort of consistently throughout using the tool about visualizing the work that people are doing with this. I think when people are creating forms, they have to bear in mind various different contexts. So they're creating something for somebody else to use, and they won't always be able to see exactly what it looks like to that person. So they're having to switch between their own perspective and that person's perspective, which it involves quite a lot of switching between abstract and concrete and so on. So we've had some really helpful feedback on this as to where it's working and where it's not working for people who are using the tool. Next slide, please. And it's been really helpful to have people talk through like what their experience and perception of that is. I think the general principle of helping people to understand what it's going to look like for that end user, or how it's going to be experienced by that end user when they complete the form, is an important principle, but figuring out at what point that's really important for them, and at what stages people need to have that indication is important. So this particular user said, "I'm projecting the image in my head of what the form will look like when it's completed. I have to use my brain a bit to imagine the layout of when the form's complete." So through this testing, we found quite a few sections and specific parts of the tool where people were really feeling like they were having to do this. And even where they were successfully doing it, it was something that could be quite challenging for some people. So we've been able to sort of build that feedback into the next stage of our designs. If we go to the next slide, we've got a specific example here of when creating a select from list question. One user found the order very confusing. So this is creating a sort of multiple choice or single choice select from a list question. And when this was originally designed, the users were initially presented with a page where they had to choose all of the possible answers that their form completers would choose from. And then they'd move to another page and they would create the question. And we had some various pieces of feedback, but quite consistently from people, neurodiverse people, saying things like this: "Oh, so the answers come before the question. What a strange way of doing it." And there was good reasons why it was designed that way, but this feedback really started coming through that that perhaps we should switch the order of that. If we go to the next slide, I think I will hand over to Chris, who's going to talk about how those insights that we saw from users actually went into the design.
Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, so as Oliver said, we heard from research that there was a bit of confusion with the add select from a list answer type, and that's, as Oliver said, the radio and checkboxes that a form filler might see. And the confusion was on the form creator side, trying to build that mental model and the correct information to ask the user. So this is kind of what we ended up with. So previously, we just kind of had most of this stuff on kind of one page. You got to the fact that you're adding all the list of options and then you get asked what's the question. Based on the feedback, we kind of returned to the one thing per page model and really kind of asked the form filler to think about the question text now. So aligning with their mental model, we say, right, okay, I can put the question in, and that helped them focus on what they think or needed the answers to be on the next screen. It felt more natural for these users. It helped them think about what they needed to add next, not just in terms of the options for the list, but also the hint text, because now they've added that list of options, they can think specifically how to frame the hints and help guide the form fillers to actually selecting the right information for them. But from the start of the product's life, we've always kind of focused with or started with the one thing per page model. The internal process itself started with kind of this edit question screen, which we had all of the options on. So that's all the question text, hint text, and anything that might impact or build a question for the form filler side. So what we did off the back of some of these rounds of testing, understanding the user's kind of complexity and mental models, is we started separating the question journey out a bit more. So by doing that, we now ask for the question answer type. So it's getting the form creator to think about the data that they actually need first. This helps them focus on how to ask for a question, or in this specific example, what information is relevant to that question itself. Maybe there's kind of back-end or policy constraints, so it is a specific group of question answers that can be asked for this one. We also looked at the front end for the form filler's point of view, so it's also one thing per page as well. We started with a single question for the first MVP, and this has actually led us to a huge amount of positive feedback from people who've been testing filling in the forms. And that's through the use of kind of auto-completes, people just kind of quickly navigating through the forms, filling in the information that they've already got saved in their browser. By coming at each of the problems within the service and new features that come up as well, we're quickly finding things that are working and things that aren't working from both internal and external users. And again, just receiving lots of positive feedback in the process. And on the next slide, we have another smaller piece of feedback, which actually came super early into the development cycle, and it was from one of our very first partners who started exploring the testing tool with us. But this bit of feedback went on to have a larger impact across the whole service in terms of content design and an introduction of notifications within the production tool itself. And that was literally just adding numbers to questions. It feels like such a small, like, duh moment, but at the time for us, we weren't really thinking about it from that point of view. But with this person, they came in and they told us all about their neurodiversity, their experiences of having long information screens, the kind of complexities between having to retain information, where they are, and what they've just done or what they're about to do next. Was quite complex. So their suggestion was actually just to add the numbers to the questions to help them keep a track of the questions that they've got in the form, where they are in the form, what actions they've done, so if they've moved or edited a question. And again, this led us to the success notifications being super specific about what it was the user just done. So for example, if they just added a new question, we're telling them specifically where that question's ended up. So it might be question 10 in the form. If they've edited one, we're telling them which question number it is they've edited. And again, if they've moved a question, we're now telling them what question has moved, like where it started number-wise, and now where it's ended up as well. So if you'd moved question 1 to be position 3, for example, we'd tell you that question 1 has now become question 3. And on top of that, that's kind of spread further with the notifications that we have throughout the service as well. So we're not just kind of saying, oh, success, or your changes have been saved. It is very meaningful feedback that we're trying to offer to the users as well. It's actually also become a part of the content for the routing feature that we had, which is basically the ability to skip questions based on a specific answer. And it's how we associate the routes with the questions in the product. It's allowing us to avoid the need for visual aids and flows so far in the product. And these are kind of big deviations from other product tools that have come before us. And it's just trying to make sure that it's easy content, easy read, and simple to kind of follow. So the example on the screen shows underneath question 1, we have question 1's root, and the if statements, the answered as well as where the user then gets taken to. So this has been updated since as well, where we're again, as part of the question text or just before the question text within that root makeup, we're also telling them where that question is in the journey and the flow as well, so that they can quickly scan and then jump to the relevant question. As part of our continual improvement approach, we always test with a variety of users, as Oliver was saying, and we always iterate based on what they're telling us, but also what we're seeing when they're using the tool. Quite often, obviously, we get a lot of users who are kind of telling us one thing, but we're seeing a different thing. They might not be able to verbalize it, but we can see quite evidently where they're struggling. It is an ongoing process. It's something that is integral to the way that we are designing the tool, iterating the tool, and developing it going forward. Another really great thing about our tool is we are using the design system and the service manual to its basics, to its core, with the one thing per page, for example, with all of the patterns and components that people have come before us and done. And it's just been really great, and hopefully we might be able to hear from one of our users on the next slide.
Shall we give it a go? All right, so hopefully this video will work. This is some feedback we had from one of our users, which we really liked.
It's familiar.
Absolutely great. This is what I like about gov.uk. It's always the same. You've got your crown, and then you've got the black at the top, and then you've got the nice green box, and it's white on green, and the background's white with the govs in bold in black. It's fabulous. It's an autistic's dream.
So hopefully the audio was good for that, and you will have heard one of our user research participants describing what they could see, what they liked about it. They liked the contrast in gov.uk. They liked seeing green buttons that helped them to understand what they needed to do, to commit an action. And they finished off by saying it's an autistic stream, which I think it's a really wonderful bit of feedback, and that's the kind of thing that keeps our team going, is knowing that we're actually making a real difference to our users. Okay, cool. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague David, who is going to try and give us a little demo of a new feature we've just shipped. David.
Yes, so I will give you a few seconds of just brief context for this. So this is a feature that loads of our probably beta partners have asked for, and that users have fed back on, and that we know is a really common feature across forms that are on gov.uk. So it's really nice to be able to get this one done, because it really opens up our product and means that more people could use it. And it's also worth saying that this is an early stage in kind of a wider process that's going to happen, where we want the different products to live under the products and platforms and services directorate to communicate with each other a bit better and become kind of more one big product. And you'll hear more about that over the coming years, probably.
David, sorry to interrupt your flow. It might be worth adjusting microphones so that we can hear you clearly.
Okay. I'll see what I can do. No. Well, that is the thing. I think as high as my microphone goes, but I'll do my best. So I'll share my screen and show how it works. Okay, so I'm in the main form building tool here, and you've got like a task list that users can complete, where they can see all the different things they have to do to get a form live. And what we've done is we've added a new optional task to that list, which is for adding a link to a payment page in gov.uk Pay, which is a nice feature that gov.uk Pay has, which lets you set up just a simple page that you can copy and paste into different places and share with users really easily. And we're kind of piggybacking on that. So when I click into that you can probably see there's quite a lot of content on this page, and that's something that was informed by user research. We found that users of our platform weren't necessarily that familiar with GovUK Pay, so they really benefited from having more information on how to set up a payment link that will work with our service. And they also benefit from some expectation setting on some things like how long it takes to set up the ability to take payments, a payment service provider on the back end, because it's government, there's a lot of process around it. So we've added that, and we've also told them some information on kind of how this will benefit the form processor who receives a submission at the end, and also how it will benefit the user. But I've followed all those instructions in advance and set up a payment link in GovUK Pay. These are the settings that I've got, and I'll save that. And then all I have to do is copy that link and paste it in here. Analytics. I'll save that. And that task is completed. And then if I preview that form, I can fill it in. And I'll request a submission email and submit that. And what I'll see is I've got a reference number, and it's told me that I still need to pay. And now we've got a button for continuing to the payment. When we click that, it kind of seamlessly takes us over to GovUK Pay, and it's preloaded the reference number in there so that the user doesn't have to remember it or copy and paste it anywhere. And then in the email that form processors get sent, and in the confirmation email that the user receives, it will contain that reference number as well. So after the fact, people can reconcile the payments, or users can send questions about their submission if they kind of need an update on it and things like that. That's kind of all there is to that feature, really. Yeah, we really benefit from GovUK Pay and how easy it is to set up a payment like that. And in the future, I think we want to do a bit more on maybe closer integration with the Pay API, but for now, we think this enables the feature for a lot of our users. So, and then I think it's time for questions for forms.
Fantastic. So I see there's a question that's kind of going on in the chat around APIs, but I wonder if there's anything else that Iain, David, and Chris, you wanted to add to that.
Not really. I think Oliver and Chris have answered that. So yeah, we're thinking about it. We're talking to teams across government. We're just in the kind of early conceptual stage at the moment. So there's no planned work for this. We just know it's a real priority for us for the second half of the year. We've got a load of priorities though, so it's just fitting things in as and when we can. So yeah, Chris has shared a link. You can have a look at our forthcoming features. We've got 3 things that we're going to be focusing on first, and which are like uploading files, saving and returning to documents, and taking multiple answers to a question, you know, a kind of like tabular format, or give us your address history over the past 5 years type thing. And so we're focusing on those 3, and then we'll be looking at this in parallel, but then we'll be able to start kind of designing, building, testing.
So I think you've answered the next question, which was about the roadmap, and Oliver, you've kind of kindly put some information in there. I think there are 2 more questions on the chat. With form payments, why does the form get submitted before payment is taken? Does the form response get emailed to the team saying payment pending? And then is there another email generated when the form is paid for? How are they tied together? Do users get an email for the form submission and then another with a payment receipt from forms or pay? Quite specific question.
I think I can try and answer those.
Go ahead, David.
So the form does get submitted before the payment's taken. It's just because even though we're trying to make those services a bit more closely integrated, at the moment they are separate. So you have to do one before the other. And it makes sense that if the form processor has the user's details, then they can kind of chase them up about the payment if they need to, and things like that. And yes, I think your kind of guesses on how that works are about right. So the form submission email that the form processor gets says, check this reference to see if it's been paid for yet. And then the form filler will get separate emails for their payment and their form. I think that's most of the questions there, but if you got any more, I can answer in the chat.
I'd probably
Thanks,
just
David.
people don't automatically get an email when they submit a form unless they choose to receive that. So as David demoed when he put in his email address, there's a feature there which allows you to get a confirmation email. That doesn't contain any of the form data. It won't say, like, you know, your medical history or your address or anything like that. It's just confirming that you've submitted a form for this service or at this time with this reference number.
Fantastic. I think that's all the questions in the chat. Unless anybody's got any other burning questions, you obviously can reach out to the team. Cara, should I hand over to you so you can introduce the next?
Yes, so we'll move on to the next talk. Thank you, Forms team. So now we are moving on to Nikin, who's going to talk about upgrading Whitehall Publisher to the gov.uk design system.
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about upgrading Whitehall Publisher to the gov.uk design system. Let me see if I can get this going. Okay, so I'm part of the gov.uk publishing team, and I'm a senior interaction designer there. So to give a little bit of background, gov.uk was designed to make it simple for everyone to interact with the UK government, and it's made up of more than 700,000 pages, covering a range of topics to deliver our mission of being the single trusted online home for the UK government. So you might be wondering, how does 700,000 pages make its way onto gov.uk? So obviously, we are using a content management system, CMS for short. And the majority of that content on gov.uk is created using a tool called Whitehall Publisher. And Whitehall Publisher is GDS's in-house CMS. It was introduced in the early days of gov.uk. And this is being used by over 2,000 civil servant publishers to upload, manage, and amend content. And in 2022, a team was formed to upgrade Whitehall Publisher to the gov.uk design system. So why bother upgrading to the design system? First off, Whitehall was using an outdated version of Bootstrap, which is a styling framework originally created by Twitter. That is no longer being supported, even by Twitter. They've kind of like put their hands up and said, we're done with this version. The gov.uk design system is an in-house GDS product with its own dedicated team, along with the community of designers and developers across the UK government that supports and maintains it. And aligned with that, the gov.uk design system is built with accessibility in mind. And finally, upgrading to the gov.uk design system will lead to a better experience for our developers to not only make further improvements to Whitehall, but also make it easier to develop new features that will ultimately make its way to our users, which are publishers across the UK government, and it can be delivered as quickly as possible. So with that in mind, you may be asking yourself, how do we go about upgrading Whitehall Publisher to the gov.uk design system? So there are two approaches. The first approach was more of a straightforward upgrade, where essentially we replaced Whitehall's existing styles and components with the gov.uk design system, equivalents. And we also kind of like went beyond the design system and looked at other departments' pattern libraries, like Ministry of Justice and Department for Education as well. So when we do that, we're essentially maintaining this existing layout and functionality. And an example that comes to mind, to my mind, is the document search page. So note the layout of the interface remained intact, all the while we deployed the stylings and components from the design system, as well as MOJ's primary navigation component, which is located directly beneath the header navigation. And there are two approaches. So the second approach was a complete 360, as there were moments where a complete rethink of both the user interface and experience needed to happen. For instance, in scenarios where there were no components within the design system or other departments' pattern libraries available to translate the interface and experience of a particular functionality within Whitehall. And although we could have developed a new component from the ground up, personally, I wanted to avoid the need of creating a one-off solution. And with that in mind, it was an opportunity to completely rethink both the interface and experience of a functionality from the ground up, all the while engaging with our users through, research and testing sessions. So this is like an example of that, where that philosophy and approach has been employed. It's the document collections functionality within Whitehall. So tasks like reordering content, adding, removing, and searching used to happen within a single interface, but translating those capabilities to the design system onto a single page could have been a nightmare, or was a nightmare when I was like playing around with it initially. So ultimately, those individual tasks are now on their own page, each with their unique URL, which is consistent with the other parts of Whitehall Publisher, much like what Chris mentioned in the forums, the one-page philosophy that design system kind of talks about. So the outcome is, after a year and a half of work, the final upgrades were pushed in last November. Whitehall Publisher is easier to navigate and use, plus it's more accessible than it ever was. But don't take my word for it. Here's what some of our users had to say about the upgrade. So there have been a fair few changes to the app, all positive. It's easier to use, especially for people new to Whitehall. It's more intuitive. This is a quote from a content designer over at the Home Office. And here's a quote from a lead content designer at the Environment Agency. The fact that you've made it clear for colleagues just joining us at the same time, not interrupting my work, is really positive. So although the upgrade has completed, this work has unlocked more opportunities for further improving Whitehall Publisher and delivering value to publishers across the UK government at ample pace. Also, this work kickstarted a trend as work is underway in upgrading our other publishing apps to the design system. And as a personal reflection, first and foremost, this project was probably the most interaction design challenging thing I've ever done during my time at GDS. And as we had to find a way to not only upgrade our user interface, but also ensure that it doesn't disrupt our users from doing their jobs. And although the benefits of the upgrades will be noticed by publishers across the UK government, its impact will reach the WK end user, as content should and will make its way onto WK with minimal disruptions. This project also allowed me the opportunity to understand the ins and outs of the WK design system. And overall, this project has taught me a valuable lesson that change is hard. And if you found this interesting, feel free to read the blog post about this project, which can be found on inside.gov.uk. And I didn't write this part, and make sure you subscribe to be kept up to date with any new updates. And that's it.
Thanks.
Stop sharing.
So we have some, not any questions yet, so please feel free to add questions onto the chat, but we had some love from Sue Williams saying that, love the new changes, collections are much easier to manage, thanks. And from Ignacio as well. Any questions, anything anybody wants to ask? We can come back to questions, so I think we'll have a little bit of time at the end as well, if people want to kind of think about it and get back. But unless there's anything else, Cara, I'll hand over to you for our next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Nikin. So next up, we're staying in gov.uk, but moving to the AI team, so the artificial intelligence team. And we have Josh Davey, who will be presenting.
So hey everyone, I am Josh Davey. I am the product manager for the AI team. And today I'm going to take you through the work we've been doing over the past few months, our findings, and what we'll be doing next. So this is a bit of a description around what the team does. So we explore and experiment with new AI technologies in a way that quantifiably improves services to the public and the way we run gov.uk. So we are running a series of experiments to explore and test if and how generative AI can improve the user experience of gov.uk. And our first experiment is a ChatGPT powered chatbot called gov.uk chat. And you can see that just on the right, a bit of an iPhone mock-up to bring it to life. So gov.uk Chat is an AI question and answer service that helps business users by giving them information on their day-to-day tasks. So things like tax, license questions. You can see on the screen here, this was an import-export one. And we recently put this service in front of real users. We were the first in government to do so. So we've had a lot of learning to do as we've kind of built things. But you can see our phased approach to testing. Again, we've kind of just had to make this up ourselves and iterate as we go. So first thing we did was build a proof of concept, did a bit of quality testing internally as a team, made sure it actually worked and gave the right sort of information. We then rolled that out a little bit to the internal content designers on gov.uk, who we gave access to a front end and a bit of a design, not unlike the one you saw on the previous slide. And they were basically checking to make sure that it had the right sort of tone of voice. You'd expect a particular tone of voice when you access gov.uk, and we wanted to replicate that in the application as we built it. We then rolled that out into lab testing. So we had moderated lab testing in which the user researchers on our team observed business users utilizing the tool, basically gave them a few tasks. Can you find this information or that information, or use it as you would sort of day to day? And I think that was with 10 business users. And that was just to validate that we actually had something of value here and something that people would use. And that's when we rolled it out into scaled testing. So we did unmoderated scaled live testing with 1,000 invited business users. And so that basically consisted of giving them a form and sort of ways in which they could rate their experience, and a couple of interviews as well. Just, again, trying to see the type of things that people would use this tool for. And what we found was that it was great for finding specific information, things that may be buried within gov.uk pages, but wasn't so good at doing calculations, people asking it about figures for tax and that sort of thing. But I thought I'd run you through a couple of our other findings about how people found the tool. So they found it helpful. 69% of participants thought that gov.uk chat responses were useful. There was a high degree of accuracy. So that was 80% for all of the answers that were asked. Sorry, all of the questions that were asked. But that isn't the kind of level of accuracy you'd expect from an authoritative source of information like gov.uk. The sort of other downside to that is that 71% of users trusted the answers that were given, even if the answers that we gave were incorrect. So what you see here is the data tells us that people like the tool and trust it, but we don't have the right sort of accuracy level to deliver a product to them in its current state. So what we're doing at the moment is technologically improving accuracy, and also we're using design to mitigate risks of inaccuracy as well. But I'll talk through that in a second. So we have to be very user-focused in the way that we are looking to improve accuracy. So focusing on the users that we've selected, which are business and tax, we are evaluating all of our accuracy improvements against business and tax questions. But at the moment, you can ask gov.uk anything about, gov.uk chat anything about any subject areas. And so as we're making accuracy improvements, what we'll probably find is that, I don't know, things within the DFE space actually goes down in accuracy as we're improving things in the business and tax space. So there's lots of measuring that we're doing and finding the right sort of combination of parameters, testing different bits of technology that generate the answers. We're testing different large language models, all to try and get to that sort of above 90% mark. So the other element of mitigating the accuracy risks, or inaccuracy risks, I should say, is that we need to design for them. So the way we're looking at this is kind of in a spectrum. So on the accuracy of being 80% side, we would be going for more controlled formatting of answers. So potentially it could output answers in a step-by-step, or it can quote things directly from the gov.uk site potentially. We would look to maybe embed it in specific journeys, not making it the core sort of end result that we'd be pointing users to. we'd be trying to supplement it with other bits of technology. But then as you move through that spectrum and you get to sort of higher end accuracy, 100%, we can go for more things that are conversational, open-ended. And the problem is, though, is that this technology inherently at the moment will not get to 100%. It's just the way that the technology works. And so we will be somewhere on this spectrum that you can see on the screen. And so it is about finding a combination between marrying up design and marrying up what's technologically possible. So in terms of next steps, we want to continue to test the GovUK chat with business users, see, or we're still trying to find what the best use case is, who are sort of maybe more niche users of this tool could be. And we're looking to test it in more of a scaled way as we go along. But the other side to what the AI team are doing is we're looking at the way that GovUK runs. And behind gov.uk, you have a whole load of content teams and others that will publish content onto gov.uk or keep it running. And so we're looking at ways in which we can also improve the publisher journey. So that could be, I don't know, make it faster for content designers to write content. Maybe we could do feedback summarization. LLMs would be great at detecting similar content across the content estate. And so there's all sorts of different things that we're going to be experimenting with over the coming months. But that brings me to the end. Are there any questions?
Fantastic, Josh. Thanks very much. There are a few questions. So if I can, I think Helen Gaskell had a question. Are you concerned about incorrect information entering or being picked up by the system and being multiplied in the large language model echo chamber until it's considered correct? This seems a risk for large language models, and I'd add that a lot of departments don't have the capacity to maintain legacy content, so that it feels like it adds to the risk. Long question, but
yeah. So there's a few things that we're considering at the moment to sort of combat that sort of accuracy issue. The problem that we have at the moment is that GovUK chat looks at about 400,000 pages across GovUK, which means that it picks up a lot of noise. Documents from 2015 that about tax that are no longer relevant. And so it is a massive job to try and filter out everything that isn't relevant, not only to this point in time, but also relevant to the business and tax space. It can span across lots of different organizational areas. And so, yeah, a huge part of the work that we're doing at the moment is how do we make sure that we focus on the right content that won't give us incorrect information. Hopefully that answers the question.
thank you. And another super technical question. It might be that you might need to pick it up on the chat, but I'll do my best. So it's from Federico Giamo. It would be interesting to understand the difference between the difference of perceived efficiency and approval of users between normal search bar, less intelligent chat, ChatGPT powered chat, to understand if the user actually understands and perceives the added value of AI, and if it balances the inaccuracy that there currently is.
I'm not sure what the question is. I agree, it would be interesting. I guess
comparing different functionalities, maybe, I guess, if I can layman's terms.
So it is something that we're considering, and when we're evaluating the benefits and the return on investment of gov.uk chat, we have to consider it against the other mechanisms in which people use to find information on gov.uk. So I guess almost a friendly competitor that we could have on the site would be search. And so when we'd get to the point of looking at how much it costs us to run the chat, we could then look at how much it costs to run search. And another huge thing that we're looking at how we can measure is, well, what are people using the information for? So there's a journey there where people find GovUK chat on a business page, they click it, they get their answer. Well, what do they then do with it? And how is it then delivered value to them? And so as we're looking to test in more of a scaled way, we're really leaning into analytics and more sort of qualitative interviews of trying to find what are business users actually using this for.
Fantastic, James. And Josh, sorry. I wonder if after the the presentation, maybe just pop in the team or your contact details if people have got any more questions. We will have time, as I said, at the end. So if people have any more thoughts or any more feedback, we will have some opportunity, hopefully, at the end to kind of come back to it.
Is that another question?
Yes, we have. Does the chat hallucinate, give false information? If it doesn't know the answer, is that why it's 80% accurate? Or is it because the information on gov.uk is out of date?
So there's a kind of few different ways in which we're defining hallucination. So one of the ways is that the LLM will have prior knowledge from when it was trained by, in this case, OpenAI. And so it sometimes will pull that information that it's learned from elsewhere, and you'll find that it will use Americanized spelling because it's pulling on that sort of history. The other thing is, yes, if it just doesn't have any sort of answer, we have found that it will just make it up. So really, like an example is right at the beginning when we were doing testing, and it doesn't do this anymore, is we were asked, what do the letters in a national insurance number mean? And we didn't have any content on gov.uk that would answer that. And it went, okay, well, if you've got an M in your national insurance number, you're a male. And if you've got an F in your national insurance number, you're a female, which is just wildly incorrect. And I'm sure people on this call don't have either of those letters in their national insurance number. And so there are lots of different ways in which it hallucinates. And so there's a lot of different plates that we need to spin to try and sort out that accuracy rate.
Super interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much, Josh. Cara, I'll hand over back to you for the next speaker then.
Great. So now we're going to move to gov.uk One Login teams. So the first presentation is by Matt, Ashton, and Monika Most, and they're going to be talking about improving cross-government understanding of gov.uk One Login.
Okay. Hi everyone. We'll be giving the first of 3 talks today about gov.uk One Login. Starting with improving cross-government understanding of One Login. So my name is Matt, and I'm an interaction designer, and my colleague Monika is a service designer. In case you didn't know, gov.uk One Login is the new way to sign in and prove your identity to access government services. One day it will allow you to access any government service using the same email address and password. Monika and I work on the central UCD team. And this team delivers strategic pieces of UCD work, including cross-program work critical to the end-to-end service, investing in distinct high-value UCD assets, and driving UCD and accessibility standards across the program. So today we'll be showing some of our recent work on helping to improve cross-government understanding of One Login. So what's the challenge? To give some context, our adoption teams collaborate closely with departments and central government service teams to support the rollout of One Login across government. And through this collaboration, we learned that teams interested in using our service wanted to explore our user journeys in more detail to better understand where and how it fits into their service. Their interest comes from wanting to understand the different paths their users might take and the details of each so they could deliver a joined-up experience. But this can be challenging when our service is continually evolving to serve a diverse range of users and service requirements. As we were working at pace, we agreed a set of guidelines to help us meet these requirements. So these included making it realistic for users to better understand our service, how our service works. We felt we needed to offer an experience that looks and behaves almost exactly like the real thing. And we felt that using the gov.uk prototype kit to create a realistic version of our service was the best way to achieve this. This is because these prototypes look and behave just like the real thing, and they let us quickly create our service pages using templates, components, and patterns from the design system. It allows us to mirror live service behavior by showing different pages based on user input. And we can also easily host and share it with others across government because it's a familiar tool for everyone. So moving into our next guideline, we felt it was important to keep the prototype as simple as possible, not just to use, but also for us to update. For example, we only require users to answer branching questions so they can click through the journey as freely as possible. And we've explored ways to simplify navigation for frequent users of the prototype. We also kept the code of our prototype organized, making it easier for service teams to hopefully download and use in their projects, as well as making it easier for us to continue to maintain and ensure it remains a trusted source of truth. And finally, we took the approach of starting small and iterating. This meant we started building the main paths through the end-to-end service, and from there we would continuously iterate to add more routes and improvements based on user feedback. So what was the outcome? We created a HTML prototype of the end-to-end service in just over 3 weeks and tested it with users before sharing more widely. So some of the things this allows users to do includes clicking through the prototype to experience the journey as their users would. As some services don't require users to prove their identity, the prototype allows service teams to explore journeys by scenario, focusing only on what's relevant to their service requirements. Users can jump to specific points of the end-to-end prototype using page index. So this feature is aimed at frequent users of the prototype who are already familiar with the journey. And we've used a grid list to help users find what they're looking for. As we know, a lot of the pages are obviously consistent. And to keep maintenance low effort, we have used iframes as a thumbnail for each page so that content updates to existing pages are automatically reflected on the page index without us having to make any updates. And early feedback on this feature has been really positive, with users liking that they don't need to click through the entire prototype each time, and also finding a bird's eye view of the prototype very useful to understand where pages sit in the journey flow. Users can explore an interactive version of our app journey. So recently we've been working on this following a request to replace images of our app screens with something more accessible and interactive. And we've approached this by starting with primary paths on iOS, but plan to add more routes and Android soon. On desktops, the app screens are displayed within a centered mobile device frame, and then that will adapt accordingly for smaller screens. And users can access notes and options throughout the prototype for additional context. To help distinguish between the prototype and the live service, we've used colors from the GovUK color palette that are not typically used in live services, with the aim of creating a consistent style for this type of communication. We use the notification banner to provide additional options at relevant points, such as emails or text messages sent to users. And we have used the panel component to create transitional pages so that service teams can understand when their users move through different journey stages. And these pages allow us to communicate important information or instructions and help us manage expectations about what comes next in the journey. Early feedback on our prototype notes and options has also been positive. And now I'll hand you over to Monika, who will talk about what's next.
Thank you, Matt. So the prototype was launched about a month ago to our colleagues across the program. So what's up next for this piece of work? Thank you. So we have two immediate next steps. As Matt was mentioning earlier, the prototype reflects the key path through the service. So there is still steps and paths to add. So that's one of the things that we are going to work on for the next version of the prototype. Furthermore, we are establishing a process for maintaining the prototype when design of the live service is iterated and improved. Next step, please. And we've already started to unpack this piece of work. And we have done that through a scenario-based approach, which really allowed us to discuss and explore pros and cons of different maintenance models, as well as chat to the relevant stakeholders about feasibility of each of the different models. So right now, the central UCD team is manually updating and maintaining the prototype, but that's not feasible. That's not an ideal solution. So one thing we want to introduce is a phased approach to maintenance. So what we are aiming towards and hoping towards is moving towards an automated maintenance model, but this requires more exploration to understand how feasible this is. So in the meantime, we're working with colleagues across the program to help us inform about when new changes has been added to the live service, and this central UCD team will then update the prototype. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if we look more widely at the opportunities that lie ahead, we are starting to see how the prototype brings value to our teams across the program by enabling them to do certain tasks more effectively. So we are starting to see that the prototype is being used as a cross-referencing tool, which means that teams are using it when needing to do design materials that is up to date, for instance, in presentations or in workshops or even in prototypes. Other things that we are seeing it being used for is for research purposes. And then again, the program's contact center, which is an entity that provides one-to-one support to anyone trying to create a one login account and experiencing difficulties. The contact center is there to help them, but they are wanting to explore how a moderated version of this prototype can potentially work as an operational tool for their staff to help people better, and as well as part of training modules. So yeah, really the different use cases we are start to seeing and the increasing interest in using the prototype and parts of the prototype in already existing work processes have shown the value of this prototype as a program-wide asset. And we're also starting to see how it has a potential for developing into new assets that could support team collaboration as well as make task easier and faster to handle. So yeah, next slide, please. I think that's our, on that note, if you want to know more or are interested in knowing more, if you are in central government, you can reach out on the cross-government Slack channel that's listed here, or you can find and read more on the service page on gov.uk, and I'll post the link in the chat in a second. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Monica and Matt. Just starting off with some love from Ignacia again. Great work. Seems like a really useful tool and lots of potential. And we had a question also by Aniruddha. Will the one login also lead to a single ID check app? Because currently there are around 4 ID check apps. Don't know if Monica or Matt, you want to take that, or happy to take that if you wish. Yeah. Yeah, I think the plan in terms of the roadmap is very much that one login presents a kind of one solution, I guess, in terms of creating an account, but also checking your identity for government services. That doesn't necessarily mean that it will take over other existing ID check apps that might be out in the market that might be used by private sector or third-party organizations. But in terms of the roadmap, we currently have, I think, about 30 services across government that have integrated with us. We recently launched or connected via private beta with HMRC. So that I guess is the direction of travel. But I think there's still a long way for us to get there. There are lots of services and lots of end users that we need to kind of make sure that the technology is fit for purpose. Another question here, is there a roadmap to roll out one login to local government? Seems like a great opportunity to join up. Do you want me to take that one as well? You both? Yeah, no problem. Yes, I think that's something that's been talked about currently in terms of our existing spending review bid. That is not in the roadmap, but that is definitely something that that is being discussed and considered, but not yet in terms of the existing roadmap. Perfect. I don't think there's any other questions. Anything else? Well, people feel free to add more into the chat, and I guess we hand over to Kim, or hand over to the next speaker.
Yeah, so next up we have Kim Clayden, who's going to be talking about designing more secure user journeys for gov.uk one login.
As Cara said, I'm going to be talking to you today about designing more secure user journeys for gov.uk one login. And my name is Kim, and I'm a senior content designer. As Matt said earlier, gov.uk one login will one day be the way to sign into all services on gov.uk, and it will allow users to sign into a service, prove their identity if needed, and then reuse that proof of identity with other services. I work on the authentication team within One Login, and what that team is concerned with is creating a gov.uk one login and signing in. So we're making some changes to these user journeys at the moment to help make them more secure. And just to start off with, I'll give you a quick look at how the user journeys look at the moment. A key thing to note is that for gov.uk one login, a user's email address is their username. That's what they sign in, along with their password and two-factor authentication. So when a user creates their gov.uk one login, they will enter their email address, and if they don't already have one, we'll send a security code that will validate their email address. Then they can go on to create their password, set up two-factor authentication, and so on. If there's already a gov.uk one login using that email address that they've entered, then the user will be told that and prompted to sign in. Similarly, if they choose to sign in and they enter an email address that already has a gov.uk one login, they'll be asked to enter their password and carry on with the sign-in journey. If there's not actually a gov.uk one login that uses that email address, then they'll be told that and prompted to create one. So we've designed it like this because our early user research found evidence of what we called account confusion. So essentially users who were fairly convinced they had a gov.uk one login, but actually didn't. And we found that telling them that early on helped them correct their journey and get on the right path as soon as possible. However, if we reveal whether or not an email address is a valid gov.uk one login username, that poses a risk to users' security. And that's a problem because it can be exploited by fraudsters in all kinds of nefarious ways. And like that risk was acceptable in the early days of gov.uk one login. But now we've got higher value services onboarding, such as HMRC that Helena referred to earlier, as well as reusable proofs of identity. So we need to do a bit more to protect our users now. There's always a balance between usability and security, and we've reached the point where we need to examine that balance again. And we worked very closely with our security team throughout this project. So solving this problem was a bigger challenge than we first thought. And that's because there's a fairly established pattern for keeping the validity of a username secret when signing in. So you can achieve this by asking for a password and username at the same time, and then making sure that the error messaging doesn't say exactly which one is wrong. There's a lot of services that use this, and Government Gateway included, which is demonstrated here. But the thing with gov.uk one login is that because it's the email address that's the username, it would still be possible to find out whether or not it's a valid username by using the create journey. And if all of our users knew whether they had a gov.uk one login or not, we'd have no problem. But analytics data shows that that idea of account confusion still exists. So we need to design for users who either think they have a one login but don't, or try to create a one login when they actually already have one. So to try and solve this problem, we reviewed how other large-scale services deal with these two unhappy path scenarios. These are the services that we looked at, and we found that they had various approaches for dealing with the unhappy paths. So a lot of them revealed whether an email address was already in use in the inline error messages, which wouldn't have worked for one login because it still makes it a bit easy to find out that answer. Quite a few use captures, which is not something we could have really considered because of the accessibility issues they pose. And then the other approach was utilizing a user's email address, which when we consulted with our security colleagues, they said that yes, that would add some security. But the way these services implemented it wasn't always that user-friendly. So for example, some gave the users false information. So they would say, we'll send you a code so you can create your account. But then actually they just sent an email saying, oh, you've already got an account, you need to sign in, but didn't say how. And then some just left the user hanging, which I think is quite a familiar pattern. So saying they would send a link to reset their password, but then just not sending anything. We did think that using the user's email address had potential for gov.uk one login though. And we also thought that we could probably improve on the usability. So we redesigned the user journeys for both the create and sign in process. In both cases, a user must receive and enter an email security code before it's revealed if their email address has a gov.uk one login or not. In the create journey, it was a case of really just changing the order of some screens. So we now send an email code to all users who choose to create a gov.uk one login. And if they already have one, we only reveal that after they've entered the code. In the sign-in journey, we used the pattern that places email address and password on the same screen, made sure that the error messaging didn't reveal which piece of information was incorrect, and again, only revealed that the email address doesn't have a gov.uk one login after the user had received and entered that security code by email, which they would get after choosing to reset their password. So this clearly relies on the assumption that when told either your password or your email address is wrong, users would think it was the password. This is based on findings from previous research, but it was also something that we wanted to test in our research for this piece of work. So I'll share a few very early insights from the user research with the caveat that it is difficult to test unhappy paths because you're giving the users a false scenario. Generally, users could complete the journey when being told they already had a gov.uk one login when they were trying to create one. They generally assumed it was something they'd created and forgotten about. They were pretty unfazed by this. They did experience some confusion in the sign-in journey though, reporting that they weren't clear if the error messaging meant their password or email address was wrong, which was what we expected. That was by design. But the good news is it validated our assumption that in such a scenario, most users would try to reset their password, which is good because that would eventually put them on the right path to finding out that they don't have a gov.uk one login, so they could then continue. Okay, final slide. Post go live, we'll monitor analytics data and user support feedback to see the impact compared with the current journey and iterate designs accordingly. As I said before, it's always a balance between security and usability, and the need for some obscurity in the journey means we are ultimately going to add a bit of friction. But based on the research and compared with the services that we've looked at, we think this is the best balance for where gov.uk one login is at the present time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kim. I don't see any questions in the chat, unless anybody's popping in any questions. Quite a lot of hands. Should we skip to the next section? Yeah, and we can always come back if folk have got any more questions, but thank you very much, Kim.
Yeah, keep adding any questions to the chat.
Oh, I think we've got a question here. Emily. She might be typing it. How do you manage if somebody has multiple email addresses? That's a good question.
That is a good question. So if they have multiple email addresses and
she added here, and they forgot which one they used for one login.
Well, they would, I'm assuming that what they would do is try one email address, go down the sign-in route, and if that wasn't the one that they've used for gov.uk one login, they'd see the you do not have a one login screen. And then that gives them the option to either create one or try a different email address. And if they had another email address that they thought they might have used for one login, that's their opportunity to try the other one. Does that answer?
And I think we've got another one from Romina. Have you looked at any scenarios to know if identity theft may be in progress or attempted?
So I know there's a lot of work going on around things like identity theft, but that's not something that I think sits within this piece of work.
I can maybe give a little bit more context, Kim, if it's helpful as well.
Yes,
there's
please.
another team within the program One Login Home that actually looks at some of the functionality around accessing your activity history and any sort of kind of notifications if you know, there is suspicion, I guess, that the account has been compromised. But I believe that's kind of ongoing work, Kim, if I'm correct, in terms of feature and functionality that hopefully should be kind of fully released soon. Emily, there's one more question from Emily. What happens to them if they set up 2 accounts with different email addresses in that case? So 2 logins, but for one person.
They would be able to sign into either one. So I'm guessing are you thinking sort of for the example where someone might maybe have one for maybe their personal stuff and one for more work or business related things? They can have 2, there's nothing stopping someone having 2 one logins with a different email address for each one. And whichever one they wanted to sign into, they could sign in using the standard route. And I guess if they realized that they'd signed into the wrong one, they could then sign out and use their different email address.
Now, one last question from Lisa M. Is moving away from text email MFA to more secure authentication apps on the roadmap?
We do already accept authentication apps. The third-party ones like Authy and Google Authenticator and the Microsoft one. They're not very popular with our users. I think about 95% choose text message for MFA, but there are around 5% on average each month that use authentication apps. And there's definitely things on the roadmap to look at other authentication methods as well, whether that's about improving security or widening inclusion for our users.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you for the questions. Cara, I think we're on to our last speaker then.
Yes. So we have one last presentation for you. This is from Shaun Conner, who's going to be talking about 182 days of accessibility team progress.
Right, so I just want to start this by saying my 2-year-old is absolutely on one today. So if you hear spontaneous crying in the background, it's not me. He chose the best day ever to start squealing every 5 minutes. So if you do hear that, I apologize. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the One Login accessibility team and what we've been up to in the first 6 months since we've been in post. So we have at the minute a very small accessibility team, and it's made up of myself, Shaun Conner, and Darren Wilson, who is a senior accessibility specialist. My background is before GDS, I worked at Monzo, where I delivered their accessibility strategy. And then before that, I was accessibility lead at HMRC. And then before that, I was a lead developer at the NHS. So very much public sector background, technical. And Darren has been a developer on the program for a couple of years and then has moved into a senior accessibility specialist role. So the first thing that we had to do when forming a new team was to try and understand the landscape of the program. And for that, we had to understand like the different channels of work that would require some accessibility input. Anybody who is familiar with accessibility work on the call will know that a lot of this stuff is cross-cutting. So the list ended up being really quite big, but it helped us shape our resource planning in the interim until the team can grow. And a really key focus for us was that we delivered quality over quantity in our work. So it would have been quite easy for me to say, right, we'll work on 10 different things. But the way I seen that was we would just dilute the amount of impact and the quality that we could provide to teams on this stuff, which I just didn't want to compromise on. So we identified 8 different work streams, is what we called them. And they varied in complexity, impact, and urgency, with some things requiring much more time than other things. And then with each of the work streams, we sat down and figured out what we needed to do now, next, and later. This was all done at a very high level because at the same time, we've been trying to onboard HMRC. The work is already happening, so we couldn't spend too much time like getting buried in the detail of what is now, next, and later. But what it was really useful to do is just, at least from a lead perspective, to look at it and manage burnout of both myself and Darren. burnout in accessibility in the accessibility profession is absolutely off the charts at the minute because there's just so much to do. So again, it was about laser focusing on what we were going to work on and then take that work forward. So we prioritized a list of things that needed to be done now, and we began delivering on those pieces of work. So what we've been up to, we carried out an end-to-end accessibility audit of the One Login web journey. We've led the size and prioritization and remediation of the audit. So the audit threw up quite a lot of issues, and pretty much all of the issues have been resolved now. We've also made sure that the accessibility statement was up to date, and that in itself has been quite a complex problem to solve because One Login is made up of many different teams and pods who own different parts of the journey. So trying to align all of those things and understand was the statement up to date? Did it reflect the current state of the service? It didn't in the first instance, but it does now. So we're really, really happy with the outcome of that. We've been supporting on the remediation and implementation of a user support chatbot. So again, when we first got sight of this, it was very, very inaccessible. And I'm very, very happy now to say that it is mostly accessible, which for a chatbot is like a really big deal. We're currently defining an approach for automated accessibility testing across the program. That we've seen this as being a quick win and something that will drive up code quality. We've been reviewed and updated our non-functional requirements, specifically around accessibility. So we did have NFRs in the first instance, but what we've done is just added a little bit more meat on the bones of those and made them more specific. And we're defining the processes that are going to underpin how the accessibility work is delivered in a sustainable and scalable way as the program grows. We've also actioned some quick wins, and we've started building capability within the program as well. So it was just last week, actually, we ran a session with our fraud pod, talking about automated accessibility testing, manual accessibility testing, interpreting the results, and really just trying to raise awareness on the program of the work and what we can offer teams. So one thing that's really important to me is that we provide value at the right time. And accessibility can sometimes be viewed as a tick box exercise. You will hear this a lot from accessibility people. If it's considered at the right time, it saves significant amount of time and money to the program. So if we take the approach of just audit the thing at the end, we deal with the technical debt, we then go and fix it all and redesign and redevelop. With all of that comes significant cost. Whereas if we can just prevent it from happening in the first place, none of that ever happens and it saves the taxpayer money. So the accessibility team now has a seat at the table in a lot of key meetings. So we're now part of the design review board, and we've presented at the product steering group as well to senior leaders, talking about the work and trying to get visibility about what, we're here, we can support. And something that's very important to me as well is that we don't police teams. I want to be seen as a team who is approachable and we can collaborate with teams, not constantly telling teams they've done things wrong and all that stuff. I'm involved in some of the cross-government communities as well. So I've joined the Heads and Leads group, and we're trying to be as involved in cross-government activities as well, just so we can share best practice and what we find and what we're doing. So I just wanted to really touch on this work is more important than it ever has been. And, one of the reasons is that we've got 30 services onboarded now. And with the amount of services that we onboard increases the amount of users. So at one point, we could be looking at 40 million users. And just yesterday, actually, the latest version of the Family Resources Survey came out. And these are some of the statistics that are specific to disability. So disabled children has went up from 2021 to 2023, up by 2%. And the stats around working age adults have went up 5%, which is significant. So we're not talking about the 1% here. It's went from being 1 in 5 to 1 in 4 people now. So I would encourage you to have a look at the Family Resources Survey. It's very, very interesting. It goes into all the detail around why these numbers have grown and some of the context around it. We've also learned through our user segmentation survey about the importance for building services that work on assistive technology. Now we do this, we can largely say that if a service is compliant to the accessibility regulations, that it should work on assistive tech. But what I mean by like it working is that we create good user experiences for people on assistive tech, not just that they can fumble around and get to the end of a transaction or whatever. And there was a significant portion of users that said they use this assistive technology, and these numbers are way bigger than what we initially thought. So another thing that is really important, and I think is going to be key to the success of our accessibility team and how we're doing things, is that we go beyond accessibility compliance. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, known as WCAG, they're a baseline for accessibility. It's a technical standard, and we can measure accessibility against it, but it's quite limited, and it's a floor, not a ceiling, in terms of gauging if something is accessible or not. So to go beyond compliance, and a lot of people talk about this, but the way I see this working is that we continue to leverage our user research capabilities. We're solving real problems for real users here. This is a substantial amount of people who could only use this thing. So it's very, very important that we learn from users and iterate based on real user feedback, especially from disabled people. We're going to baseline our user research and measure progress against key user groups from our user segmentation report. And one that I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into is that we want to try and define and report and resolve usability issues and barriers that fall outside of WCAG compliance. Now, historically, this is actually quite hard to do because it's not something that we can really measure at the moment, but it's not an impossible task, and it's something that I feel really passionately about. And I think it's a problem that we can solve and maintain our reputation as being like the best in the world for creating accessible, usable things for our users. And then the last thing that we're going to be focusing on is just working on the culture, educating colleagues within the context of our roles, and helping people understand the role that they can play. Whether you're a product manager, delivery manager, senior leader, like, we want you to know what you can do to support this work, because it is very, very important. So what's next? We're going to be developing the governance and assurance to set teams up for success. We're going to be starting to develop some robust documentation and improve our tooling to drive up design, content, and code quality. A big thing that we're going to be looking at is WCAG 2.2, and specifically what accessible authentication means to OneLogin. It's a thing that everybody's going to have to log into, so trying to unpack this and understand it and create an accessible method and being compliant to that part of the standard is something that we're going to focus a lot of time on. Again, just focusing on the culture, the education, and building the compliance models, so we have a sustainable and effective accessibility strategy. And something I'm really excited to do more things like this and talk at show and tells and get involved in cross-government and try and share what we're doing with wider government as well. So if you'd like to get in touch with myself or Darren or the team, I've left the accessibility team shared inbox, or if you want to contact me personally, I've got my email address there. Does anybody have any questions? I'm aware I've just absolutely blasted through that, but I've got the 2-year-old anxiety of a crying child like in the back of my mind.
Thank you, Shaun. I'll give people the opportunity to add any questions onto the chat. We don't have anything at the moment. You can hear my 2-year-old. It's that time of the day. Fantastic. I don't think we have anything at the moment. Thank you very much. I guess I think Cara wanted to share some kind of wrap up information, but we'll give the opportunity, and if any questions pop up, we can come back to them, I guess. Nope. Okay. Thank you, Shaun. Cara, are you with us?
Trying to share. It says screen sharing is paused.
It is, yeah.
Resume share. Let me try again.
You can definitely hear that. A bit of love here from Romina. Thank you, Shaun. That was a masterclass in how to do accessibility.
Okay, here we go. So yeah, thank you to all of our presenters today, but thank you to all of you as well for joining and for all of the amazing questions and engagement. It's been really, really nice. If you want to learn more about all of our work at GDS, we have a GDS blog, and then we have some specific blogs. So one for gov.uk, an accessibility blog, a design blog, and a services blog. And you can also follow us on Instagram and X, and we're on LinkedIn as well, sharing more. So yeah, please find us there. We're also, we'll have this recording on YouTube if you want to look back at anything or share it with your colleagues. We will have the link up and share it on the social media channels that I've mentioned. That's it from us. Thank you so much for joining and spending your afternoon with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.